G'day, Dave here, and we're looking at Ecclesiastes. I'm going to be picking it up with you at chapter 5 from verse 8. Solomon has been embarking on a quest to explore life, to find meaning, see whether there's something that he can grab hold of, something which makes sense of life. And in chapter 5, where we're looking now, and verse 8, he sees the problem of injustice. There's always been injustice. He sees injustice, there always will be injustice. We see injustice around us all the time. You see it on the news, you see it as you open your eyes and you just look at the way people are being treated. Let's read from Ecclesiastes chapter 5 and verse 8. If you see the poor oppressed in a district and justice and rights denied, do not be surprised at such things. For one official is eyed by a higher one, and over them both are others higher still. The increase from the land is taken by all. The king himself profits from the fields. So the reality is, as we look at life and look at how people treat each other in this world, we see injustice. It's an individual problem with the way individuals treat each other. It's a family problem, the way different parts of families treat each other. It's a community problem. It's a societal problem. It's a worldwide problem, the problem of injustice. You can't blame any particular aspect of society, whether you're looking at the public sector or the private sector, whether you're looking at developing nations and corruption there, or whether you're looking at the developed and affluent world and the corruption there. It doesn't matter whether you look at communism and the seizing of things by the state and the control of the economy, or whether you're talking about capitalism and people actually building their platforms, their empires on the hard work of the poor. And of course, we live now in what's called a global economy. It'll be interesting to see what this looks like when we come out of this lockdown. A global economy where the world's wealth is held by a tiny percentage of people, and where the huge majority of our world suffer great injustice at the hands of those who oppress them. The rich who are demanding things to be even cheaper, who are building things and manufacturing things in places with very little cost to themselves, indeed actually developing another slave labour market where people aren't even paid a basic wage so that the rich can get even richer still. And we feed that. We feed that by wanting things at the cheapest prices. We see it in bureaucracies where there is and always has been different layers, and you can pass the buck. So no, this isn't the right department, you'll need to go to that department. You get bounced around and one to the other and so on. You see it when you're at the other end of a phone call and you've typed in 5 consecutive numbers and you finally get to speak to somebody and they say, no, you've got the wrong department. And they say, well, look, it's okay, I'll put you through, and you're waiting on hold for half an hour and you just get through and the phone drops out. You see, injustice is everywhere. You see it with the strategies of the banks, making the fine print too small to be able to read, preying on those who can't understand these things, looking at dropping hidden costs and fees into accounts that people have, even charging those who are deceased. The incredible immorality that we see with people looking to get rich at the expense of others. And that's the way the world is. It's the way the world always has been. It's not a working class problem, it's not a middle class problem, it's not a wealthy upper class problem, it's not a problem with the corporate enterprise nor with government. You see, the problem stems from the human heart. When we look deeply at ourselves, we know deep down that we've got a heart problem. We are selfish and we want for ourselves, and that causes conflict. That causes, as I get, others to miss out. And of course, we've seen that recently, haven't we? Whether we're talking about avoiding taxes or whether we're talking about the bulk buying of toilet paper, putting me first and others who are vulnerable and weak and incapacitated and who need, unable to get because we've hoarded at others' expense. Friends, we long for a world that's not like that. We long for a world where there is justice, where people are treated fairly, where there is no wealth that's accrued on the backs of the poor and the vulnerable. We long for a world where things are put right, where there is reliable people of integrity, where there is a government with justice, where things are the way that they should be. We long for a world where people actually love, where people care, where people are generous, when they serve, when there's justice, when there's equity. We long for a world that's like that. But we're not going to find it by looking at utopian ideals. It's interesting when you look back at the bushfires that we were going through, and there was great emphasis on how well we're working together, and a huge kind of shout out to the hard work of the fireys and the coming together of communities. But then there's the next news report that talks about the looting and the arson and other things. And now the struggle that people have to get insurance payouts or to be helped to the money that the government have promised. You see, there's always going to be injustice. No, we shouldn't put our hope in a utopian ideal that somehow or other will put things right. We need to put our hope in the God who promises that there will come a day when he will put things right. And I'd like to read to you from Isaiah chapter 9. It's a promise you may well have heard. It often gets read at Christmas. Speaking of the future, Isaiah says, "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders. And he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the greatness of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this." God has promised that he will install his king, who will rule with justice over this universe. Friends, the coming of Jesus marks the arrival of that king. Will you look to that king? Because it's only in Jesus that we will find ultimate justice.